We still have Mr. Avenio missing in action. So am I supposed to designate another winner, or we hold it for him? We hold it for him. Okay. So at some point, I guess we will have the honor of showcasing Mr. Avenio to the audience, for those of you who don't know him. So congratulations to the laureates and well done. But as I said, all the 31 presenters are winners. And it is a great testament to the promise of Africa. And in terms of the theme for this conference, the quality of the papers that were presented, the insightful analysis and policy recommendations that were made to be kept alive and reverberate across the continent, because all of them speak to the issue of promoting climate smart development. So thank you very much, organizers, for selecting this very topical theme for this conference. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That's part of the ceremony is over. Now we do the closing ceremony. Over to you, the Executive Director, representing Mauritius at the Board of the African Development Bank.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good afternoon to everybody. Did you hear me? Good afternoon. Dr. the Honorable Regan Padayachi, Minister of Finance, Economic Planning, Development of the Republic of Mauritius, and also the Governor on the Board of Governors. Professor Kevin Urama, Acting Chief Economist and Vice President, African Development Bank Group. Dr. Anand Morsi, Deputy Executive Secretary and Chief Economist from the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Raymond Gilpin, Chief Economist, Head of Strategy, Regional Bureau for Africa, UNDP. Distinguished guests, members of the press, dear colleagues from the African Development Bank, all protocol observed, ladies and gentlemen. Surely everything that has a beginning has also an end. We are at the closing ceremony of the 17th edition of the African Economic Conference. It's time now to quit the talking and begin the doing. This closing ceremony, as the last event of the African Economic Conference 2022, provides an opportunity to reflect on the outcomes of the 3-day discussions, to look forward to the future, and to work on concrete strategic actions to address climate-smart development in Africa, as well as building resilience and transition towards low-carbon development pathways. For this closing ceremony, we will have 3 main institutions who would have been leading the economic conference over the past 16 years. We will invite the representatives of each of these institutions, the African Development Bank, UNICA, and the UNDP, to deliver the perspective on this 2022 African Economic Conference before having the closing remarks by the Honorable Renganardan Padayachi, Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Development. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Kevin Urama has been very convincing since the first session when he requested for a paradigm shift and for changes in the ways of doing things in motherland Africa. For the need to throw the box away instead of thinking outside the box, something that we have always learned about. We would like to start with him, and I invite Professor Kevin Urama, the Acting Chief Economist and Vice President of the African Development Bank Group, to deliver the speech for the bank. Professor.
Good evening to everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to stand on already established protocols. I recognize in our midst the presence of our governor, the finance minister for Mauritius, who has demonstrated what is real leadership. From the time that the first delegation of the African Development Bank Group came here to prepare for this conference, he has been fully engaged. And he has demonstrated that again in the conference in itself, not only the insightful words he gave us during the opening session, but his presence continuously, even unto the closing session. Please give it up to my governor. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. On behalf of the president of the African Development Bank Group, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, I would like to thank the government and people of Mauritius for hosting us in this beautiful island of Balaclava. Your warm welcome, the beautiful islands, the great food, the great hospitality has already made me thinking I made a mistake booking a return flight. And I'll be back. Thank you so much for that. We're also very grateful to our governor, as I have said, for his presence, his leadership, to the Prime Minister for his leadership in hosting this conference in Mauritius. I'm also very personally honored to have our Executive Director, Idi Busset. He came with the delegation in the first instance. He has been here guiding us, making sure that everything is done to the books, that we're so proud of Mauritius that I hope we will be able to have another AEC here in the no distant future. Thank you so much, Idi Busset, for that. And I also like to recognize the presence of Professor Vincent Mehiele, the Secretary General of the African Development Bank Group, who has been very supportive with his team and in his presence, his contributions, and so on. Thank you so much, my brother, for being with us. And I would also like to thank our partners, my two great sisters representing UNDP, my sister, Ezia Kongwa, and my sister, Hanan Mosi. Thank you so much for your great partnership as we've continued. As we hear, this is the 17th conference that we've had. So that tells you how long we have been working on this together. Thank you so much for that. I also want to recognize the presence of our partners, other multilateral development banks and global institutions who were represented here to bring to bear their visions, their ideas, and their convening power to making climate smart development work for Africa. I recognize the World Bank, who's Vice President for Southern and Eastern Africa, Victoria Kwakwa, was with us. She's already gone back for other engagements. The Chief Economist for the Africa region, Andrew Dabelen, was with us. I want to thank them so much for their partnership. The United Nations Environment Program was with us. The International Panel for Climate Change, IPCC, was here with us. The African Union Commission was here with us. The Global Africa Growth Initiative of the Brookings Institution was here with us, and several other institutions that joined hands with us to help have this dialogue and make it a success. Thank you all so much. To all the delegates, our smart researchers, and all the resource persons that has helped the discussion, representatives from our governments, from Seychelles, from Senegal, from Nigeria, from all countries, of many countries of the continent that are represented physically, and those who joined virtually. Your presence here gives us the confidence that we will be able to make it happen to do climate smart development in Africa. Because in the end, all these discussions ends up in what you and I will do after the conference. Thank you so much. We had in full force CEOs of commercial banks, global banks that were here with us, helping us to understand what we need to do to make that their huge capital held in assets under management, to leverage that for helping to build climate smart development in Africa. We heard you, and we are listening to you, and we will continue to engage you until that capital is unlocked for development on the continent. Thank you so much. And more importantly, Africa's youths. The youths of Africa were here in full force, and I personally enjoyed the dynamism, the innovation, the visionary thinking that was emanating from this podium when you were sitting on the podium to share your views. You made recommendations to us on what governments should do to hear you more, what the African Development Bank Group and other MDBs should do to hear you more, what the private sector should do to hear you more. I want to thank you for that vision, because in the end, you are the present of Africa and you are the future leaders of this continent. Thank you so much. Just to demonstrate that the African Development Bank Group listened carefully to you, one of your recommendations, the Africa's youths, was that we should convene a youth conference on climate change in Africa. And you also recommended that we should learn to use more of the virtual platforms, the social media, and so on, to be able to, and I quote, meet the youths where they are. We heard you. And in this regard, I've consulted very quickly, and the African Development Bank Group has decided to convene a global community of practice dialogue on Africa's youths for climate smart development in Africa. That convening will happen as soon as after the Christmas season. So my colleagues who are leading that, can you stand up so that you have a responsibility to deliver? Dr. Njeri Wabiri, who is leading the Global Community of Practice platform, will liaise with you to agree on a date no later than the first quarter of 2023. And I hope that will create a platform that will continue to engage with you, because I personally believe that the solutions to Africa's problems are in Africa's youths. Your innovations, your knowledge, your energy, your power. Use that so that we can do climate smart development on the continent. Now we have had 3 days of rich discussions. We have learned a lot on what the challenges are. We've learned a lot on what the solutions could be. We have learned a lot on what the private sector can do for us. We've learned a lot on what the governments need to do in order to help leverage the skills and capabilities and technologies that we all have. We know the technologies are there. We also know the financing is there. So it's just about how we make it happen for the continent. As we leave, going from here, I would like us to consider this the beginning of an ongoing discussion, a beginning of an ongoing conversation. First, a conversation with myself. After hearing all these experts, what can I do to contribute to climate smart development in Africa? What can my ministry do? What can my institution do? What can my government do? And just like the president of the African Development Bank in the opening speech called, together, we'll be able to make climate smart development work for Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for highlighting the need for working together to the challenges and the solution as well. Dr. Hanan Mosi, a dynamic senior executive who had led on top quality economic research and development works for various international financial institutions, has shared with us her insightful experience as part of several panels. Thank you, Dr. Mosi. I would like now to invite Dr. Hanan Mosi, Deputy Executive Secretary and Chief Economist, representing the UNICEF, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, to take the floor.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency, Honorable Minister of Finance of Mauritius. Thank you so much for your active participation. We're honored to have you here throughout the conference. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me start first by thanking the government and the people of Mauritius for the warm hospitality in this beautiful city. Special thanks go to also the senior government officials who have been really actively participating throughout this conference across the continent. That really helped us have very engaging discussions across the board. We have had very interactive panels, concurrent sessions, and special events that really brought together very bright young researchers across the continent with practitioners and policymakers, and allowed us to really use the sharp minds of our researchers and the practical insights of our policymakers and experts to deliberate on emerging and critical issues of climate change and implication for development in Africa. I want to commend all the researchers and young economists and experts for their hard work analyzing the development conundrums and proposing concrete recommendations to help African member states to achieve climate smart development. I would also like to thank our partners, the African Development Bank, the UNDP, for excellent partnership and close collaboration for this successful organization of this session of the African Economic Conference. After 3 days of extensive interactions and debate, you would agree with me that addressing climate change is not a choice. It's an imperative that is possible for Africa to achieve with climate smart development. And I have to say that I have been really impressed with the engaging and insightful discussions that we've had from the participants and audience. I was really touched by the level of interest and engagements and the type of questions that we're having. This only shows us that this is an issue that is galvanizing interest across the board within Africa. And this is really what is needed for us to move on that agenda forward. As such, the issue of what we have developed here, what we've discussed here in terms of climate smart development, is not just an event. This is a process. And for it to happen, it's very important for African countries to pay attention to the analysis and recommendations by various young and established researchers that have been presented in this conference. We all have a role to play here. Climate smart development requires a whole of society engagement with different stakeholders playing and really acting on the responsibility from citizens, private sector, civil society, and the public sector, as well as coordination beyond our political borders as challenges does not just, is not limited to the continent. We have to go across border to collaborate across the board to really move that agenda forward. Africa, as we have discussed, is actually looking for a just future in the climate change. We are asking for just inclusive transition in our energy systems and to promote sustainable practices across the sector to minimize the contribution to climate change while pursuing our development. As we look forward to the next year conference, which we will be sharing the details with all of you, we look back with recognition that there is a lot being done to facilitate climate smart development, but information needed to be more accessible for developing countries. This will be key, as we have discussed yesterday, the importance, for example, of having data for us to do more, for example, in the blue economy and utilize this huge untapped potential. Moreover, there's also a question about the capacity to take advantage of existing opportunities. This need to be focused on and developed, nurtured, leveraged collectively to make an impact on climate smart development. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa is now in a better position to successfully undertake climate smart regional integration more than ever before. The economic, regulatory, and political reforms that countries have undertaken over the last 2 decades have laid a strong foundation for successfully achieving that. Yet, as we have discussed over the last 3 years, we need to move from process toward implementation and actual instruments and resolutions to make this hard work a reality for the women and the youth in Africa. We are encouraging the young researchers to maintain the pipeline of this brilliant research and for innovative youth to rise up to the various challenges, and policymakers to provide the conducive enabling regulatory environment. Let me just recall that during the COP27 conference that was held in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, for me, among many panels and many interactions I've had, the most exciting and promising one was actually the one where we had a group of African young entrepreneurs that are actually taking climate action in their hands, working and acting on it. And that really was the element of that conference that gave me most hope, because when you see these young entrepreneurs with their innovation, with their passion, with their determination, you know that we can only move forward and develop and the future will be better with their engagement. So I truly believe that from both researchers and entrepreneurs, this is where the future and the power for change in Africa will come from. So we will count on all of you for taking this work forward, for pressing into implementation, for thinking of the remaining issues that we need to dig much deeper in so that we can actually make progress going forward. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa is committed to continue to work with its partners in various endeavors to bring about climate-smart development on the continent. Let me finally express my thanks and appreciation to all the colleagues from the 3 partner institutions who contributed to the organization of this year's conference. Many thanks also to the interpreters, local and international media, the technicians who facilitated virtual participation, and everyone who contributed to this successful meeting. Thank you so much. As we go back, I wish you safe travel and put you on notice to look forward for our next conference. And I hope to see the same level of engagement, passion, and participation going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morsi, for highlighting the importance of innovation and research, as well as the responsibility of all the stakeholders in addressing climate-smart development, including the youth, policymakers, researchers, and climate experts. I would like to call upon now Mr. Raymond Gilpin, Chief Economist, Head of Strategy Regional Bureau for Africa of UNDP. And as you know, UNDP has been contributing a lot in this conference. So thank you to UNDP. So I invite you to take the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of our administrator, Mr. Akim Steiner, and the Regional Director for the Africa Bureau at UNDP, Ms. Ahuna Eziakonwa, who unfortunately had to leave early. I'd like to thank you all for being part of the 17th African Economics Conference. I'd like to start by expressing sincere appreciation to the Honorable Minister for being here with us, for his commitment and his dedication to ensuring that we have not just a fruitful 3 days of deliberations, but also a wonderful stay in this beautiful country of Mauritius. Thanks also to the warm people of Mauritius, whose hospitality has made this conference, I think, a resounding success. As we conclude this 17th edition of the conference, I'd also like to express sincere thanks to our partners, the African Development Bank and the UN Economic Commission for Africa, and to all of you participants, particularly those who joined us online, for your meaningful contributions and your forward-looking interventions throughout the conference. The discussions have taken stock both of the fundamental uncertainty that climate change presents to each and every one of us, as well as the unique opportunities that it can unleash. Such fundamental uncertainty can change reference points and social norms. And as COVID-19 has shown us, it could also trigger unprecedented financial and monetary responses. Right now, we believe that we are at a global inflection point. Africa stands to be most affected by the many headwinds, such as rising energy prices, increasing food prices, droughts, and the undermining of global multilateralism. But in spite of all of this, we believe that there are signs of hope. Our host country, Mauritius, demonstrates both the miracle and the potential of sustainable development. This 17th AEC will be remembered for many reasons, but I'd like to highlight just 4. First, we reaffirmed that climate-smart development is not an optional extra for African countries. It's an urgent necessity. Economic development in Africa must be conscious of planetary pressures, and we must take and we must fully address the uncertainties that this poses for both development discourse and development practice. In this context, we must also tackle the gap between the thinkers and the doers in this field. Second, we must be particularly mindful of the economic, fiscal, societal, environmental, and political costs of green transitions. We fully understand that there are trade-offs and opportunity costs that communities, families, and nations must bear. And we are committed to avoiding the pathways that undermine development prospects and deepen inequalities. In counting the costs, we must also bear in mind that transitions must not only be green, but they must also be just and inclusive. The loss and damage mechanism established in COP26 is a good start, and UNDP is committed to continue working to bring electricity and facilitate transitions across the continent. However, let us remember that reaching net zero emissions must also mean reaching zero poverty. Third, we must do more to ensure that the AEC provides a forum for purposeful dialogue and curating development intelligence. The purposefulness of the AEC must lead to strategic partnerships, including with the private sector and with the youth. And we should also establish and grow productive linkages at both national and regional levels. The AEC must not become an echo chamber where we meet each year to talk amongst ourselves. Let us not be like the proverbial tree that falls in the forest and no one hears it. We must be change agents. We must be connected and energized. Fourth, we affirm that climate change development compels us to go beyond aid. A good example of this paradigm shift is the launch of the SDG Investor Map here in Mauritius earlier this week. Through such initiatives, UNDP is working closely with the private sector to make hundreds of new SDG-aligned investments in countries such as Mauritius, Ghana, and South Africa. We must see development not as a luxury for peacetime, second to humanitarian assistance, but more importantly, as an investment proposition. Funding today's development needs must pay off for a better future, for prosperity, peace, and planetary balance. Honorable Minister, distinguished guests, Africa is the world's richest continent in terms of natural resources, arable land, renewable energy potential, and a youthful and dynamic population. The main challenge of development, therefore, is to transform this endowment into prosperity, peace, and justice. There are just 7 years left for the world to meet the SDGs. Africa is the litmus test in this regard. If Agenda 2030 is to be fully achieved globally, it must be achieved in Africa. The African Economics Conference has shown that Africa has brilliant minds, passionate people, and committed institutions that could transform the continent and achieve its full potential. In the words of one of our young panelists yesterday, Winnie Cheche, We need to move beyond great ideas and policies that we discuss at high-level meetings and make climate-smart development a reality at the local level for ordinary citizens in a way that includes them, enhances their agency, and involves them in this exciting journey. We firmly believe, as we leave here, that Africa's time has come. I thank you once again for your kind attention and for your participation in the 17th AEC, and wish you, if you're traveling, safe and pleasant journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Raymond Gilpin, for highlighting, for emphasizing on the need for commitment and synergy between government, private sector, the bank, and all the partners in order to achieve our objective with respect to climate smart development. I would kindly ask you to give a good round of hands to our three speakers who have now set the ball rolling for this agenda of climate smart development. Ladies and gentlemen, we like to express our profound gratitude to the government and people of the Republic of Mauritius for hosting this conference. And I would like to add my voice to that of the previous speakers to thank the government for the support extended to make this event a successful achievement, and also for having given us the comfort we needed to be able to deliberate in this very pleasant environment. I would like to request you to give a big round of applause to the Republic of Mauritius, represented today by our Minister, Dr. Honorable Taganadene Payarachi, Minister of Finance and Economic Planning and Development. Thank you, Minister. Thank you to the government of Mauritius. Minister, the floor is yours. Please come forward.
Merci. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Anand Morsi, Deputy Executive Secretary and Chief Economist, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Professor Kevin Urama, Acting Chief Economist and Vice President, African Development Bank. I'm going to give you a few minutes to put on your headsets because I'm going to be speaking in French. Dr. Raymond Gilpin, Chief Economist, Regional Office for UNDP. Mr. Gérard Buissier, Executive Director, African Development Bank, dear representative of private, public entities and academia, media friends, guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Here we are at the end of this 3 very rich days filled with debates, discussions that we've had. I would like to say to all of you, thank you. Thank you for your participation, thanks to which, and thanks to the quality of your interventions and reflections, we have made the 17th edition of the African Economic Conference a true and real success. I would like, on behalf of the Mauritian government, to share our immense gratitude to the partners who have organized this conference, the African Development Bank, UNDP, and the UNECA. It was a great privilege to have you here in Mauritius, and for the very first time, this African Economic Conference that has brought together more than 350 delegates in person. This demonstrates your trust in us, and it honors us, and we can only hope that we can soon renew this experience. Ladies and gentlemen, the conference has given us the opportunity to debate on supporting climate smart development in Africa, and we have spoken about different opportunities that this presents us for the development of our continent. Africa is by far the region that is the most vulnerable in the face of climate change. And therefore, it is time. And we have seen many lives are threatened. And we have seen that we have temperatures beyond 1.5 degrees will just lead to more deaths. More deaths on our continent. And if we limit climate change, we are going then to save lives. And that's why this gives us a great deal of meaning to our actions. If we have more than 1.5 degrees in Africa, we are also going to be able to increase our potential and to have an impact on our GNP on the continent. And that's why we have a great deal of optimism and hope that we're going to have from the sixth evaluation report, because we are the region that has all the resources that are going to make sure that climate change is going to be a pivot for social development. With 75% of arable land available on Earth, we have our carbon figures that are so low, with only 1.5% of the global emissions and abundant natural resources. Africa is actually the continent for the future, a future that is going to work under sustainable development from an economic, social, and an environmental point of view. The green economy that is inclusive and robust is an ideal that we can achieve only if we achieve certain conditions. In these conditions, I can talk of three main components. First of all, the willingness of the African government. Our continent is going to bring together 2.5 inhabitants in the next 25 years, and half of them are going to be people of less than 25 years. As political decision makers, we have the responsibility to these future generations. It is therefore our duty to make sure that climate change is fought as a priority, and we are going to integrate it in each and every one of our decisions. Climate should not be treated marginally, but should be at the center of our public actions in all our African governments.
D'être les éclaireurs du climat pour rassembler à nos côtés la société civile et les
We must show the way on climate, bringing together civil society and our people in this major project. For this, we need to transform our commitments in acts and opportunities. This is an imperative. In this regard, the adoption of national strategic plans, and this linked with international commitments. And why not go beyond that? This is the ambition that we have in Mauritius. Indeed, as we did the Prime Minister during the opening session of this conference, Mauritius has made as an objective to work towards attaining the 60% objective with the reduction also of the use of charcoal. We have national ambitions that we must extend to the continental level, and that way our voice will be heard. Together, brothers and sisters, we must require more solidarity from the most developed countries and international organizations together to work towards developing Africa. Climate cannot be left to a club of the rich. The COP27 agreement is going in the right direction. The setting up of the fund for losses is also a good preparation for COP28 and in particular for Africa. Indeed, through this approach, the most vulnerable countries in the face of climate change will receive compensation to take account of extreme climatic events that they are faced with. This is a big step forward. Ladies and gentlemen, as a Minister for Finance, I cannot close this meeting without dealing with the challenge of financing the climate agenda in Africa and the role of agencies. We have seen a degradation since the launch of COVID-19. We cannot continue to request more funding towards the climate agenda and have this rejected because of a certain interplay of the estimation of our worth. And we need to do this for the African continent. The agencies integrate more and more formally the challenge in their system. It is therefore an imperative that this punitive model be abandoned to allow Africa to dispose of the resources for our ambitions. For this, African states, without this, African states will be hitting against the problem of exorbitant costs to their funding, leading to increased debts and also the risks of collapse. That's why African countries must rise against this, and to do this, let's not put a full stop to the COP27 on the climate challenge. Let us continue to engage, to commit, and to exchange for the future of Africa, our people, our economy, our biodiversity. To conclude, may I recall our African roots of a lot of wisdom and pragmatism. The tree that falls makes a lot of noise, more noise than the forest growing up. With those words, I would like once again to thank you for your presence and for your contribution. Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister. Thank you for your optimism. Thank you for that conclusion.
Ladies and gentlemen, alone we can do so little. Together we can do much more. This is from Helen Keller, an American writer. We like to show our deep appreciation for the teamwork among all our staff, from the African Development Bank, from the Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning and Development, from all the institutions that have worked together night and day as a dedicated team to make this event a real success. A big round of applause to all of them. Please allow me to especially recognize our bank colleagues who took the lead in the organization of this conference as hosting institution for this year. AEC 222 organizing core team, Mr. Salami, Amina Riyahi, Rachel Nubizi, Abdoulaye Kolibale, and his team. For the PCER, Emana Anufuro, production, Janvier Condé, interpretation, Alain Chinda, protocol, Lebo Mabot, operation, Margaret Camo, security, Mark Ellington, medical, Benjamin Fouda. A special thank to the team from Ministry of Finance, Vishunram, Nita Moti, Anna Ojwa, and of course our minister. I want also to take this opportunity to thank the technical team, hotel management, language interpreters, the police force, the ambulance services, for the incredible service and dedication that made the event even more successful. I will look forward to seeing you all with your enthusiasm and active participation next year to the 18th African Economic Conference. Dear brothers and sisters, we conclude here by wishing you a safe trip back, a bon voyage. And before we leave, we'd like to invite all the delegates for a group photo just after this closing ceremony that is now. So I think that some of our colleagues will help us in organizing ourselves. Thank you very much.